Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Keegan here. I'm back with another video for you guys, and today I'm bringing you guys another edition of Keegan's movie reviews once again. So, for today's episode, I'm finally bringing you guys part 6 of the James Bond reviews. Now, in the last part, I covered all 4 of the Pierce Brosnan Bond movies, and today we're going to be covering all 5 of the Daniel Craig Bond movies. We're going to be covering Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, Spectre, and No Time to Die. Now, there's a few things I need to say before we actually get started. Number one, this is going to be a very long video, as we are actually going to be covering 5 movies this time, which is out of the ordinary for most of my movie reviews, as I usually tend to cover 1 to 3, sometimes 4 movies in some episodes, depending on how much I can fit in the title of the title box, which this is going to be kind of different because I'm actually going to be covering 5 movies. And another thing is, I actually already talked about No Time to Die back in season 3 after I saw the movie in theaters back in 2021. However, I've decided that I'm going to talk about it again, as I actually recently revisited the film over the weekend for the first time since I saw it in theaters. So yeah, and if you would like to check out my original review of No Time to Die, I'll leave a link to that in the description down below and in the end cards at the end of the video. Anyways, that's about it, so let's not waste any more time and let's get right into it. So we're going to start off today with Casino Royale, which was directed by Martin Campbell, who previously directed GoldenEye, which we covered back in part 5. And this film was released on November 17th, 2006, and came out just about 4 years after Die Another Day came out back in 2002. And some argue that this is the best James Bond movie, and some people argue that Goldfinger is the best one. I can't decide, but I can definitely agree that this is definitely one of the best films in the franchise, maybe even the best. It's kind of the one that really changed the franchise. It's a lot grittier and slightly darker than some of the previous ones that came out in the 80s. And Daniel Craig does a great job, and this was the one that definitely proves that he can play as Bond. And some argue that Daniel Craig may be the best Bond actor next to Roger Moore or Sean Connery. Well, that depends on who you ask. Now, I can't decide who I think is the best actor to play Bond. I think all the actors who played Bond were all great, but I can't decide who is the best one out of all of them. And I think this was also the very first James Bond movie I ever watched. It was between this one, Spectre, or Skyfall. One of those 3 was one of the first Bond movies I ever watched. But enough of that. Anyways, we're just going to get into the plot of the film, and then we'll get into my thoughts on it. So let's take a dive into Casino Royale. Now, in this one, James Bond is on his first mission as a 00 agent, and he attempts to stop a private banker named Le Chiffre, who is played by Mads Mikkelsen. And Le Chiffre is a private banker who helps fund different terrorist organizations around the world. And Le Chiffre is planning to raise money at a poker game after he lost billions of dollars after a plot against the MI6 goes horribly wrong and he lost billions of dollars with it. So he's trying to raise money to get the money back for some of his clients. So Bond attempts to defeat him in the game of poker at a place called the Casino Royale. And during the mission, he falls in love with a woman named Vesper, played by Eva Green, who you might know from the movie The Dreamers. And he gets help with Bond gets some help with some allies like Felix, played by Jeffrey Wright. And he does everything in his power to stop Le Chiffre. But if he stops Le Chiffre, will Bond and Vesper be safe? And without giving away too much, that's basically the story of the film in a nutshell. It should definitely go without saying that Casino Royale is certainly one of the best films of the franchise, or maybe, if not, maybe even the best film in the whole franchise. And from the opening scene, like from start to finish, it makes it feel like the whole franchise was rebooted from square one, and they start off with a bit of a dark and gritty look to the film. And the opening scene that was in black and white was a great start to the film. And it's like almost as if they were they were restarting the whole franchise with this one, and having all the other films that come out after it are all connected in some aspects, which I thought was a great start. And this was definitely a great start, even though it doesn't really matter. Well, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter which James Bond movie you start, although I would recommend starting from Dr. No and making your way to the end. But this movie just feels like it's the start of a new franchise or something, which is kind of unique. But aside from that, I thought Daniel Craig did a great job in this movie. He's definitely one of the best actors who played as Bond, and this was definitely a great start to the Daniel Craig era. It's action packed, and the action sequences are really well done. And it's a little slow, but it's the payoff is really good too. And Mads Mikkelsen was great as the villain, like always, as he was always great in all the villain roles he's played in over the years. And Eva Green did a great job playing as Vesper, who is probably one of the most recognizable Bond girls, and maybe the first Bond girl that comes to mind when you think of a Bond girl from any of the James Bond movies. Now, some of the poker scenes go on for a little bit too long, which is kind of my only issue with this movie, but that's fine. It kind of fits the movie perfectly because it does revolve around poker and stuff. But that's kind of my only issue. They kind of go on for a little too long, but that was fine. And the theme song, "You Know My Name" by Chris Cornell, or Connell, however you say his name, that's one of the best theme songs to any James Bond series. Especially the opening credits too is pretty cool too. But I can't remember how old I was when I first watched it, but I remember watching this movie on TV when I was really young, and I thought it was awesome. And this was before I really got into the James Bond movies. And like I said, I can't remember if this was the very first James Bond movie I watched or not, but it was one of the first ones I watched for sure. But other than that, I really enjoyed Casino Royale, and this might even be my favorite film in the franchise. I don't know though, I can't decide. It's definitely one of the best films in the franchise for sure, and it might even be the first James Bond movie some of you guys watched, but who knows. But anyways, I don't have anything else to add, so I'm giving Casino Royale an 8.7 out of 10. Next up, Quantum of Solace, the direct sequel to Casino Royale. This movie was directed by Mark Foster, who previously directed Monsters Ball, Stranger Than Fiction, and Finding Neverland. And this film was released on November 14th, 2008, so it just came out just about 2 years after Casino Royale came out. And Quantum of Solace is known for being the Bond movie with the shortest runtime of the whole franchise, with only a runtime of 106 minutes, which is genuinely surprising considering most of the Bond movies are usually 2 hours or over 2 hours. And some of the early ones were just under 2 hours. And it's also surprising considering Casino Royale was just about 2.5 hours long. But somehow, Quantum of Solace is the shortest film in the whole franchise to date, especially if you count the 2 unofficial Bond movies. Now, I will say Quantum of Solace is a huge step down from Casino Royale, and I know some people didn't like this one, but I didn't mind this one for what it was, but we'll get to more on that later. But right now, let's get into the story of Quantum of Solace. Now, Quantum of Solace actually picks up immediately right after Casino Royale ends, which at the end of Casino Royale, it ends with James Bond capturing Mr. White. And at the very beginning of Quantum of Solace, it starts off with James Bond in a huge car chase while trying to extract Mr. White to MI6 to have him in custody. And after he does that, Bond is on another mission to stop a corrupt businessman named Dominic Green, who might seem like your average eco-friendly entrepreneur who seems to trying to fight against climate change, but in reality, he plans to destroy a valuable resource in Bolivia that could potentially cause chaos in the country. So Bond is on the way to stop him. While along the way, he's trying to stop an assassination attempt on M, who M begins to wonder if she can trust Bond or not. And without giving away too much, that's basically the story of the film in a nutshell. Now, as I mentioned before, this one is a big step down from Casino Royale, and I know some people don't like this one as much as Casino Royale, which I can totally understand. It has its flaws, but I honestly thought this one was pretty good. But it's definitely not the best one in the franchise, but I would still say it's somewhat of a worthy entry into the series. But again, definitely not as good as Casino Royale. But I found some enjoyment out of it. It's got some good action, and I find the pacing is a lot faster in this one than in Casino Royale, but that's just my opinion. And I thought the villain in this one was pretty good, but definitely not as good as Lashif from the previous film, but it was a pretty good villain. And I especially like the big car chase scene at the beginning of the film, and the final battle with the villains at the end of this one. It was pretty good too. And for a Bond movie that's only 106 minutes and the shortest film in the whole franchise, it's not bad. Definitely not the best one in the franchise, but I'd say it's somewhat of a worthy entry into the series. But again, not as good as Casino Royale, but it's not bad. It's not great either, but I still got some enjoyment out of it. Anyways, I don't know what else to say about Quantum of Solace. It's not bad. It's not as good as Casino Royale, but I found some enjoyment out of it. And I'm giving Quantum of Solace a 7 out of 10. Now we move on to what might possibly be my personal favorite film in the franchise. I'm not sure, but it's definitely one of my favorites for sure. And that is Skyfall, the 23rd film in the franchise. This one was directed by Sam Mendes, who also directed American Beauty, 1917, Road to Perdition, Revolutionary Road, and a couple of other great movies. He also directed the next film, Spectre, which we will be talking about here in a little bit. And anyways, Skyfall was originally released on November 9th, 2012, and was a big improvement over Quantum of Solace, quite a bit. And I would regard this one as one of the best films in the franchise. Although, some people say it's the one that is not a good James Bond movie, but I'm not really quite sure what people get by that. But whatever, I think that's just their opinion. And I actually remember the first time I watched this movie pretty well, actually. I remember watching it on the airplane when I was coming home from my trip to Newfoundland back in the summer of 2013, and I was 12 years old at the time. And this was the movie that got me into really enjoying the franchise. Well, what got me into liking the franchise, I should say. And it's definitely a big improvement over Quantum of Solace, I'll say that, but we'll get to more on that later. But anyways, let's take a dive into Skyfall. Now this one picks up sometime after Quantum of Solace, and at the start of the film, James Bond tries and fails to retrieve a stolen hard drive which contains the names of all the MI6 field agents who are undercover, and he fails once he's accidentally shot off a moving train by a fellow MI6 agent and is presumed dead, but he keeps a low profile for a little bit, but doesn't stay long after the MI6 building is blown up by a hacker. And it turns out the hacker is revealed to be someone from M's past. And James Bond comes back and tries to find whoever's responsible for the attacks before the hacker could leak more, who starts leaking out the names of each MI6 agent who is undercover, which can cause chaos and casualties. And it's later revealed that the person behind it is Silva, played by Javier Bardem. And so James Bond is trying to stop Silva and try to save MI6 from his chaos. And without giving away too much, that's basically the story of the film in a nutshell. Now, Skyfall was a huge improvement over Quantum of Solace, and I'd say this one was just as good as Casino Royale. maybe slightly better. I don't know, but it's just as good as Casino Royale, I'd say. It's slightly darker than Casino Royale, I'd say. And I actually really liked the villain in this movie, Silva. And I don't know about you guys, but Silva is my favorite villain in the whole franchise. I don't know what it is, but I thought Silva was a really good villain, and I thought Javier Bardem did a really good job playing as him. You might know Javier Bardem from the movie No Country for Old Men. And I really like the action sequences in this one. I think my favorite part of the movie was the final battle that took place at the Skyfall Manor, which at the end, towards the end of the film, it was revealed that Skyfall was a place that James Bond grew up in as a kid. And the whole battle between Silva and his henchmen there was just the best part, with the car with the guns and the big explosion at the end. I don't know. It was just an epic final battle to end the movie. And yeah, I overall really enjoyed it. And if Skyfall were to be the final movie in the franchise, which of course it didn't, I think this would have worked as the final movie in the franchise. But of course they kept going after this one. And I really like the opening credits in this one too. And the theme song that was sung by Adele is probably my favorite theme song out of all the James Bond movies that's come out. But hey, that's just my opinion at least. But all in all, I really enjoyed this one. It's definitely one of the best James Bond films of the whole franchise, and is probably the second best in the Daniel Craig era, next to Casino Royale. But yeah, overall, I love this one. And if you haven't seen Skyfall, definitely check it out. It's definitely one of the best films in the franchise and one of my personal favorites. But anyways, I'm giving Skyfall an 8.7 out of 10. Next up, Spectre, the 24th film in the franchise. And much like Skyfall, this one was directed by Sam Mendes and was originally released on November 6th, 2015. Now, if I remember correctly, I believe this one was originally going to be the last film in the Daniel Craig era of Bond. However, it wouldn't be until No Time to Die, which was the last film in the Daniel Craig era. But I do remember something that this was originally going to be the last film in the Daniel Craig era, but alas, it wasn't. I don't know, but I wasn't really a big fan of this one for some reason, but we'll get to more on that a little bit later. But let's take a dive into Spectre. Now, Spectre takes place sometime after Skyfall ends, and James Bond is on a mission to investigate the secret organization known as Spectre, while Bond is still being tracked by MI6, and the new M of MI6, named Mallory, who is played by Ralph Fiennes, is trying to help keep the MI6 branch alive. And along the way, Bond turns to an old nemesis and looks into Dr. Madeline Swan, who is played by Leah Seo, who might be connected to Spectre and might be able to help bring them down and try to bring down the leader. And Bond also confronts someone from his past in this one too. And without giving away too much, that's basically the storyline of the film in a nutshell. Now, I wasn't a big fan of Spectre, but don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's a bad movie or anything, but I don't know, it wasn't as good as Skyfall or Casino Royale. But it did have its moments. All the action sequences were good. I especially loved the opening scene in Mexico City and the big chase in London around the end of the film. But I don't know. I just wasn't a big fan of this one for some reason. But that's not to say it was bad. But I don't know. But Daniel Craig was great as Bond once again, and Leah Seo was a good choice as playing Dr. Mallory Swan, who is actually the only Bond girl in the whole franchise to appear in more than one movie, as she also appears in No Time to Die, which we're going to be getting to shortly. And Ralph Fiennes was good as the new M, although his character was also in Skyfall, I forgot to say. And Christoph Waltz was good as the villain, but I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of the Blofeld in this movie for some reason. But I will say Christoph Waltz was a good choice as the villain, but I don't know. I think the villain could have been developed a little more, but that's just me though. But I don't know. I didn't mind Spectre. Like it's not to say I didn't like the movie, but I don't know. It's not my favorite one in the franchise. Um, but it's not bad or anything. But I did have some enjoyment out of it. But it's definitely nowhere near as good as Casino Royale or Skyfall, but it's still fairly good though, I guess. But anyways, I don't have anything else to add, so I'm giving Spectre a 6.8 out of 10. Alright, now on to the 25th film in the franchise, and also the final film of the Daniel Craig era, No Time to Die, which was directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga, which, if that name sounds familiar, then you've probably watched the first season of True Detective. He was the director of some of the episodes in that show, well, involved with them at least. And No Time to Die was originally released on October 8th, 2021, and it's also the longest film in the whole franchise. It has a runtime of 2 hours and 43 minutes, making it the longest film of the whole franchise. Now, as I mentioned before, I already covered this movie back in season 3, but we're going to talk about it again anyways. And I actually do remember going to see this movie in theaters. I saw exactly 1 week after the film came out, and I enjoyed this one for what it was. It was pretty good. Better than Spectre, but definitely nowhere near as good as Casino Royale or Skyfall. But I think it still makes a fair ending to the Daniel Craig era. But we'll get to more on that in a little bit. But right now, let's take a dive into the story, and then we'll get into my thoughts on it. So let's take a dive into No Time to Die. So this movie starts off not long after Spectre ends, and it follows James Bond and Madeline on a trip to Italy just to enjoy the peace and quiet and beautiful scenery of Italy. However, that peace and quiet has been cut short when some Spectre agents are sent to go after Bond and Madeline. So Madeline and Bond split, and then the film flash forwards to 5 years later when James Bond retires from being an MI6 agent and lives his life in Jamaica in peace. That is until his old CIA friend Felix, played by Jeffrey Wright, asks Bond to help him out trying to rescue a Russian scientist that was kidnapped by, what's his name? Lyutsefer Safin, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. That's the villain of the movie, and he's played by Rami Malek. And so Bond agrees to come out of retirement to help Felix, and he teams up with a 00 agent named Nomi, and together they help try to rescue the scientist and stop Safi from releasing a chemical weapon that could wipe out millions. And it's later revealed that Safi and Madeline know each other as they knew each other in the past. And without giving away too much, that's basically the story of the film in a nutshell. Now, I really enjoyed this one when I first saw it in theaters. I had a lot of fun seeing it in theaters. And it's a lot better than Spectre, like I said before. But again, it's not as good as Casino Royale or Skyfall. But it's still pretty good. And I think it works off as a great send-off to the Daniel Craig era. Although, there are a few issues I have with this movie. The villain in particular. Now, don't get me wrong, I thought Rami Malek was a good choice for casting as the villain. However, I think the villain could have been developed a little more. Like, towards the end of the movie, he kidnaps Madeline and her daughter, and they take them to an island where the final confrontation takes place to prepare to unleash the chemical weapons around the world. But it's not really clear why he wants to unleash the chemical weapons around the world. He got what he wanted. He's got Madeline, but why does he need to release the chemicals for? Like, what did the world do to him? Other than he wants revenge, but okay. But again, I thought Rami Malek was good as the villain, but the villain could have been developed a lot more. And this one is long, but I actually don't mind the long running time for this one. I thought the long running time fits it perfectly. And it's got some good action. Definitely some of the best action sequences of the whole franchise. And yep, I enjoyed this one. And I actually didn't mind how it ends. I don't know why. I wasn't a. I don't think I think I'm. I don't know if I said this or not in my original review. It's been a while since I last watched it, but I don't think I was really a fan of how it ended or something. But I actually kind of like the ending now, watching it a second time. But despite the flaws, I thought No Time to Die was a pretty good sequel. Although, not my favorite film in the series, but I thought it was a great send off to the Daniel Craig era. But again, it's nowhere near as good as Skyfall or Casino Royale, but it's still enjoyable. If I were to rank all the Daniel Craig movies, I would rank it with Spectre, Quantum of Solace, No Time to Die, Skyfall, and Casino Royale. That's how I would rank each of these movies. But I don't really have a whole lot to say about this one. I enjoyed No Time to Die, especially on a second watch. And I thought it was a good send off to the Daniel Craig era. And who knows who's going to play James Bond next, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. But, anyways, I'm giving No Time to Die a 7.4 out of 10. Well, guys, I've finally done it. I've covered all the James Bond movies. Well, all the ones that were released by Eon, after all, the production company that's responsible for all the James Bond movies since Dr. No. There are actually two more James Bond movies that I'm gonna cover, but we're gonna cover those another day. And that, of course, are the two unofficial James Bond movies, the 1967 Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again. But until then, we're gonna save that for another day. But don't worry, you're not gonna have to wait long because it'll be coming out soon. It'll probably be out by next week, but we'll see. But until then, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, leave a comment below, and subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and share the video with your friends. And what's your favorite film in the Daniel Craig era? Let me know in the comment section below. And like I said at the start, if you want to see my original review of No Time to Die, I'll leave a link to that one in the description down below. And it's on the end card that you see on your screen. But once again, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, this is Keagan Shepard signing off. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. And take care, everybody. Peace out. Bye-bye.